right, welcome to another session on the Disaffected Nigerian podcast. Today, I have Miss Wofai Samuel, with whom we'll be discussing commercial relations between America and Nigeria. She is the Director of Communications for the Nigerian-American Chambers of Commerce. Welcome to the show, Miss Wofai.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased, very excited and honored to be here.
Yeah, the pleasure is mine. So would you please introduce yourself to everyone? Tell us who you are, your journey through life, and how you got to where you are today.
Thank you very much. My name is Wofai Samuel. I'm the current Director of Communications, Government Relations and Advocacy to the Nigerian-American Chamber of Commerce. Prior to the Nigerian-American Chamber of Commerce, I worked with the UK-Liberia Chamber of Commerce as a Director of Communications. I worked with Foreign Investment Network as the Head of Oil and Gas. And I also worked with Africa Energy and Infrastructure Publication as the editor. On the sidelines, I have moderated conferences for multinational organizations, policymakers, institutions, organizations across the globe, talking about the US, Europe, Asia, Africa, and so on and so forth. And yeah, I'm here today. I'm basically from Cross River State. I live in Lagos. Thank you.
That's quite an intimidating resume you have there, I must say. Now, I understand you studied zoology in uni, so I'm very curious, how did someone with a background in zoology find themselves in the media space?
Okay, thank you. So yes, indeed, I studied zoology and environmental biology as my first degree, University of Calabar. I graduated in 2011-12. And I also proceeded to the University of Lagos, precisely in 2020, where I earned a diploma in human resource management and organizational development. Now, I always wanted to be a science student. Art was never really in the picture. And that was the reason why I opted for zoology. You know, I'm passionate about nature, about animals, to name a few. But along the line, I think my passion changed, and it was too late for me to switch from the sciences to the arts. Communication was just the thing I always wanted to be involved in. Media was the thing I wanted to do. I always admired people who were very vocal, people who were extroverts, people whose voices mattered when it comes to the affairs of engagements around the world. I always wanted to be like them. I always wanted to be a voice for my community. I always wanted to be a voice that people can reckon with. You know, more like a one-stop shop when it comes to policy advocacy. And that's how I opted into the media. I started with TV. I was on TV. I think my first appearance on TV was when I was 15. So yes, about 15 thereabout. So I started on TV as an anchor. I was a newscaster. I have ventured into radio, various forms of media. I'm talking about writing, public relations for government officials. And along the line, I just thought I needed a larger voice. I needed to reach out to a larger audience. And so I ventured into corporate communications. That's how I get to moderate an interface between communications, engagements, discussions, and dialogues for multinational organizations. And of course, I am now currently working with various institutions as their communications lead. Like I mentioned, my passion for communication was just basically informed by wanting to make a change, wanting to be a change maker, wanting to be impactful, especially in my community and across the world.
Oh, interesting. So you've done the whole NIADS, broadcast journalism, public communications, public speaking and all. Interesting. All right. So in simple terms, what would you say is the Chamber of Commerce?
Okay, so a Chamber of Commerce is like a network. It's an organization where you have various business people, various like-minded individuals from the business sector. When you talk about the business sector, it traverses oil and gas, manufacturing, agriculture, mining, to name a few of them. So all of these people come together and they form a network. When they form a network, the structure that binds that network is a Chamber of Commerce. So we are not a government entity. We are more or less not for profit. We are not a government entity. All we do is advocate for the right policies to the government. We're like a voice. I mean, if you want to create a change, sometimes it's very difficult when you're speaking alone. You need an organization that is reputable, an organization with reputable people, so to speak, an organization with a structure to push the change that you want to see while you are also in the middle, you know, in the face of these changes. So the Chamber of Commerce is more like that structure that pushes that advocates for the change that people want to see in businesses, especially from the policy side, from the government. So I would also like to say that the Chamber of Commerce is like your one-stop shop, your foremost platform for identification when you're going into business in any country or any city or region. So instead of dealing with the bottlenecks and the hurdles that involve with starting a business, running a business, sometimes you want to go to the Chamber of Commerce for due diligence, for advice, because that is basically what they are structured and programmed to do. So in simple terms, and to summarize this, the Chamber of Commerce is like a network of various individuals, various businesses, various institutions that are geared towards moving businesses and economy forward for multinational organizations, large-scale enterprises, SMEs, that's small and medium enterprises, to name a few. Thank you.
All right, interesting. So are there any criteria for any business to be a part of a Chamber of Commerce? In this case, the Nigerian-American Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, definitely. Like every organization or every institutions, there are criteria for you to become a member. There are criteria for you to be a part of any organization. So the Chamber of Commerce is not different. Now, it varies. So the US Chamber of Commerce has their criteria for membership quite different from the British Chamber of Commerce. I worked with an organization that was an affiliate of the British Chamber of Commerce. So our criteria was quite different, specific to the Nigerian-American Chamber of Commerce. If you want to become or you aspire to become a member of the chamber, you should measure up certain criteria and requirements. One of them is, okay, so I'll put it in very simple terms so everybody understands. The categories are segmented into three. So your business has to be in one category. You cannot join the chamber as an individual. You have to be a business. You can't join the organization as, a single entity as an individual. So now we categorize the businesses into three. So number one is like a premium category. Premium category are for multinationals. So when you talk about multinationals, we're looking at the likes of Chevron, the likes of Shell, what's it called? MultiChoice, Microsoft, Google, to name a few of them. These are multinational organizations whose earnings are way above 1 billion. So when I say 1 billion, I'm talking about 1 billion in my currency, that's Naira.
That's unicorns, right?
Second category. Say it again.
Are you talking about unicorns? Like businesses that are worth $1 billion are referred to as unicorns. So are you talking about unicorns?
Meaning the profit you make.
Okay.
Yes, the profit you make at the end of every year has to be over a billion naira.
Okay.
So you're looking at things like Google, Microsoft, MultiChoice, like I mentioned, and then we have the category B members whose turnover are below 1 billion naira. So if you're looking at below 1 billion naira, you're looking at below 1 billion naira to 500 million naira. So you have category B members like EcoBank, a lot of banks across the country are members of the chamber. Then you have category C for SMEs. Category C for SMEs are organizations whose earnings are below 500 million naira every year. So these are category C members. You can be, if you have an organization that is duly registered with Corporate Affairs Commission, you've measured up with all the requirements for registration, and you're sure that you earn between XYZ amount of money to 500 million naira, you can be a category C member. So these are just some of the criteria. And then maybe many other criteria. What's the number of people you have working with your organization? Have you gone through the due process of registration? Do you have your certificate of incorporation? All of this. And then somebody from the chamber does due diligence on your organization. So you've submitted all your documents, you'd like to be a member of the chamber. The chamber appoints its membership officer to carry out due diligence on your organization. So we visit your organization, get to interface with your staff, actually take a detailed look at your earnings to be sure that everything you said corresponds with the documents. And that's it. The process is not just as complicated as people anticipate or imagine.
Okay, so I'm curious, for a business to be a part of the Chamber of Commerce, does that business have to cater to both the American market and the Nigerian market?
Okay, thank you very much. So primarily, we are the Nigerian-American Chamber of Commerce. Two things. So we are interested in strengthening the economic relationship between Nigeria and the United States. So for investors, businessmen who are seeking to work with the US, Nigerian-American Chamber of Commerce is your one-stop shop. So this should be like your first port of call for due diligence information. And then businesses, people who are seeking to work with Nigeria from the US, same thing. Our Chamber of Commerce stands as an interface. And like I mentioned, we're the foremost We're the oldest in West Africa. We were established in 1960. So we're way above 50 years. The credibility is there. Now, your direct question is, I hope I didn't miss the question.
Yeah, I said,
question, please?
Yeah, given that the Chamber of Commerce is named Nigeria-American Chamber of Commerce. So I'm curious, do businesses that are registered to the Chamber of Commerce, do they have to cater to both the American market and the Nigerian market?
Fantastic. Thank you very much. That's a very brilliant question. Like I just mentioned, we are an interface between Nigeria and US for trade, business. Now, the first port of call is the primary thing we consider is, are you interested in banking? Are you interested in doing business with the US? Are you interested in investing in the US? Are you interested in buying from the US, exporting to the US, importing from the US? Now, if the US is your market, we are your best friends and we're your best niche. That's point of sales number one. Then the second one, number two, is for Nigerian businesses, because remember, there's a Nigerian and there's an American. It's not just businesses who are interested in going to the US, or who are interested in establishing or strengthening their relationships in the US. Businesses in Nigeria will who seek to grow by way of getting more information about what is required for their businesses. There's a policy that has been put out by the government, and you think you want a chamber to speak up for you, just like I'm speaking on this program right now. There's different categories of communication. You want a voice. You want to amplify your voice. And you're a Nigerian business, even though you're not stationed in the US. Yes, of course, the chamber welcomes you. So like I mentioned, the first category primarily is for Nigeria, America. And of course, the second one is for businesses in Nigeria, of course. But like I mentioned, Nigeria, America is our primary focus, our primary target.
Okay, you did say that the Chamber of Commerce does help in fostering bilateral relations between countries. Now, I've been thinking about America-Africa relations for a while now. In the past 10 years or so, the relations between America and Africa generally has dwindled. It's in the gutters right now. And first of all, why do you think that is? There's this divide between America and Africa. If you look at the chart, America's investment has stagnated for a while now. America's investment in Africa has stagnated, while China's investment has gone through the roof. So why do you think there's this divide between America and Africa, given that both parties stand to benefit a whole lot? Africa has unquantifiable mineral resources, and of course, America has a lot of investment. So one would think that both parties should have a well-oiled relationship, but unfortunately, there's a divide between both parties, especially within the past 10 years. Why do you think that is?
Well, thank you very much. I'm an advocate. I'm pro-American. Professionally, socially, in all ways, America has contributed immensely to my professional career trajectory and, of course, my social life. So I would always speak for America. But objectively speaking, I do not think there's a divide between Nigeria and America. What I think has happened is, over time, a bit of interest has dwindled. So some parties have decided to move backwards, not forgetting that whether you're talking about Russia, whether you're talking about the United Kingdom, we're talking about the US, every country is seeking dominance. Every country wants to be dominant. Every country wants to expand Africa. Now, who've always been there for us? America has always been there for us. Now, we have a relationship with China, which is not strange or alien, because we also have a relationship with the UK. We also have a relationship with Russia. But every country or every continent, every region trying to, prove dominance in Africa is not strange, because, Africa is the least developed continent on the planet, in the world, and the fastest developing continent in the world, Africa. Now, in the next few years, Africa will have the most youthful population the world has ever seen. We are well aware of that. Africa is home to millions and billions of natural resources. So it's only fair that the West, so to speak, the world scrambles for its natural resources. It's only fair that the world scrambles to forge a bilateral, multilateral, unilateral relationship with Africa. Now, what has happened over the years, or what we've seen with the US over the years, like I mentioned, it's not a divide. It's not, so to speak, a bit of I would say a slowdown in interest. Now, how this has happened is, over time, the US has been very focused on the US. So we've seen, from past presidents, they put the US at the forefront of their innovations, the forefront of their policies, to a reasonable extent, neglecting Africa. When I say neglecting Africa, not neglecting Africa in full swing, because we've seen so many initiatives from the US government, from the likes of, let's trickle it down to the times of Barack Obama. Barack Obama came up with AGWA. We've seen Prosper Africa, just to name a few of them. Now, the US has always had its niche in Africa, but what has happened, like I would reiterate and keep reiterating, is over time, there was a little bit of lack of interest expressed, and China came in to fill up this vacuum, especially in the infrastructure sector. So US provides aid to Africa, but a lot of times in form of humanitarian assistance. I dare say in the entire world, no country in the world, no continent has provided humanitarian assistance for growth and development to Africa as much as the US has done. So China has come invested in infrastructural projects, speaking about roads, speaking about rails. You've seen what is happening in Rwanda, Uganda, to name a few of them. Now, China comes up with very juicy offers. So they're investing XYZ, $500 billion in your country, and at the end of the day, you're supposed to repay after a time frame. If we end up not repaying those loans, China takes over our assets. China takes over our minerals. That is what is obtainable. So it's not like China is doing us a favor. It's a two-way thing. They give us loans, and at the end of the day, if we're not able to repay these loans, they take over our assets, they take over our minerals, they take over some of our natural resources. Now ask yourself this question. For some of the loans that are being owed to China, how would Africa be able to pay even in the next 50 years? That's a question for debate for some other time. So US has always had interest in Africa. US has always had its, I wouldn't say tentacles, I would say its niche in Africa. But like I mentioned, over time, the US has been very focused on itself. And so the interest in Africa to a reasonable extent dwindled because they felt like there wasn't so much they could get from Africa. But now China is coming over and taking in full force. And of course, the US is not sleeping. The US is working tirelessly to ensure that the relationship between them and Africa is strengthened. We saw what happened recently with the US-Africa Summit, where we had over 40 African leaders in the United States, of course, discussing how the US can possibly support Africa's climate change goals, to name a few of them. Recently, there was a conference in the US, the Nigerian-American Chamber of Commerce was proud to be part of. That's the Select US Summit, where we had leaders from various countries in the world talking about investing in Africa. And of course, some of them were also talking about how they can possibly invest in Africa. We represented Nigeria, and it was a robust conversation we had. So the way forward is advocacy, advocacy, advocacy. And that's why we have chambers of commerce like ours, who continue to push out policy subjects, who continue to push out conversations on how to strengthen the relationship between Nigeria and the US. US happens to be a very key trading partner in Nigeria, and we cannot afford, to allow the vacuums between Africa, Nigeria, and the US stay or linger for so long. Finally, to close this particular question, I'd like to say that foreign direct investment between the United States and Nigeria, and I'm sorry, I keep making reference to Nigeria. Nigeria is like the largest country in Africa in terms of population. So to a reasonable extent, when you've covered Nigeria, you've covered the most of sub-Saharan Africa. But we saw that the investments from the US to Africa doubled in 2022 compared to what we had in 2022. So all 2021. So all hope is not lost. All hands are on deck. Chambers will continue to do what they do, and we as communicators would continue to communicate the right messages to the right people who think that they'll listen. Thank you.
Yeah, but I think you already answered the question, but let me just ask, how do you think this divide can be breached from a Chamber of Commerce perspective?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, it can be breached by communication and advocacy. So we come up with policy subjects. We were in the US recently. I was in the US recently. What are we talking about? Who are we talking to? We met a few policymakers. How can we possibly foster positive working collaborations between the US and Nigeria? AGWA is set to expire in a few years, and we're seeking to see how AGWA can be renewed. What's AGWA? Africans benefit from?
What's AGWA? I don't know.
Okay, AGWA is African Growth and Opportunities Act that allows Africans to export their products to the US on very minimal or almost no tariff. So, if you're exporting to the US, you have to pay your taxes. Sometimes the fees can be enormous, magnanimous, magnificent. So AGWA is put together by the United States government, precisely the US Department of State Trade and Commerce, to make it very sublime, the fees and the taxes that we pay on goods that we export to the US, almost pay nothing. So as long as your goods measure up the requirements, the standards, you can export to the US for almost nothing. Now, you also need to be sure that you're exporting the goods and products and services that fit into the category of goods, products, and services that ought to be exported. So to respond to your question directly, when you're talking about what can possibly be done, advocacy, advocacy, advocacy. That's the number one role of any chamber of commerce, advocacy. So we speak to our business communities. What would you like to see? What do you want to hear? What would you like to have the government do? And then we push these messages. As a chamber of commerce, we have a voice. The government listens. The business communities listens at all levels. So I think the first thing that's supposed to be done, the first thing that should be done is, strengthening advocacy. Then the next thing is Africans engaging more with the diaspora community. So we have a lot of business people we have a lot of businesses and business entities in the US that are owned by Africans. What impact are these businesses making? These businesses are successful in their own rights, but are they able to compete favorably with other businesses that are of international standards, other businesses that are internationally recognized? We need to up our ante. Africa already has, so to speak, a label. So gone are the days where the world used to see everything that comes from Africa as inferior or lower quality. These times have changed. I see a lot of traders in Africa doing well with multinational organizations. So we need to up our ante. We need to up our ante. We need to up the quality of the things we produce and export. We need to up the quality of the things we manufacture and export out of Africa. Then a few other things that would need to be done is, like I mentioned, still boils down to policy, engaging with the right people, engaging with policymakers, stakeholders. Gone are the days where the policymakers and stakeholders in the US just sat back in the US, not visiting Africa. Now, with the US-Africa Economic Summit, immediately after the US-Africa Economic Summit, we saw Her Excellency Vice President Kamala Harris visiting Africa, touring a few countries in Africa. All of that is to strengthen the relationships that Africa and the US has. So we need to try as much as we can to advocate for more policymakers from the US to visit Africa, come to Africa, interact with us, interface with us, and you'd see that the numbers, the statistics and figures are not as bad as you think. Thank you.
All right, speak to me more about your trip to the US. What are the high points of that trip?
Okay, thank you very much. So we were in the United States of America, precisely in the states of Washington, D.C., Virginia, and Maryland. We went there on a 10-day business trip, and it was more like a trade mission. So the trade mission is an annual religion of the chamber where we get to, what's the word now? We are responsible, we cater to, what's the word now? So we send people, in very simple terms. We send people from Nigeria to the US, members, staff, and so on and so forth, to interface with the US business communities and policymakers on what is favorable for our businesses, our members. So the 2023 trade mission was held in May, where delegates departed from Nigeria to the US. It was an opportunity for them to attend, for us to attend the Select USA Summit. That I talked about the Select USA Summit at the beginning of this interview. So it was an opportunity for us to attend Select USA, and also an opportunity for us to interface with the US business community. So we had conversations around real estate. How can real estate, what's the word now? How can entrepreneurs in the real estate sector invest in US? And how can we have people in the US who are interested in buying lands, building houses, invest in the real estate sector in Nigeria? So conversations span real estate, agriculture, oil and gas, fashion and apparel, to name a few. And I'd like to say that a lot of deals came out from the just concluded trade mission to the United States, and we look forward to engaging more. So one of the ways we express ourselves, one of the ways we showcase our mettle is by organizing consistent trade missions to the US and back, because it gives us an avenue to relate firsthand with Americans, firsthand with the American business communities, and then come back here to relay the messages that we've gotten from them, the lessons that we've learned, and do things better.
Okay. Are there some projects or initiatives the NACC has in store you would like to share?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. I was actually looking forward to that question. So I'll just give you a brief of what we've been able to do from the months of December up until now. So we are about advocacy. Like I mentioned, we create platforms for businesses to express themselves, or like a voice. We also create platforms for learning, education, because knowledge is power. The more you know, the more successful you become. So we create platforms that are very educative and interactive, where we bring in policymakers and key stakeholders from various arms of businesses and multinational organizations who are like at the forefront of promoting businesses in Nigeria to interact with our members and our medium, large, small communities. Now in December, we had the Honorable Minister of Trade Investment at our events, where interactions were done between himself and members. And then we also had a series of events that we organized this year, where we've had attendance, huge attendance from various SMEs, large enterprises, and of course, medium-scale businesses. We've had organizations, we've interfaced and partnered with organizations to host some of this knowledge exchange programs. So we've had our platforms in the past few months being graced by the Bank of Industry, BOI, EcoBank, Fidelity Bank, exporters from all over Nigeria. And when I say exporters, I mean the biggest exporters from across the country. They've been on our platform, they've graced our platform. Nigerian Investment Promotions Council, NIPC, we're trying to foster a relationship right now with that Flexing Bank, have them on our platform to speak, Nigerian Export-Import Bank, and Bank of Agriculture, to name a few. So the possibilities and opportunities are endless. They are indeed endless. So we just keep pushing, and we're sure that our little contributions would, in little or no way, contribute to the success stories of a lot of businesses across the country. Now, speaking to current projects that we're working on, like I mentioned, we're working on our knowledge, educational, and cultural exchange platforms in form of breakfast meetings, in form of events that we have, monthly, once every 2 months, bi-monthly, to name a few of that. Then we also have our trade missions coming up. We have a trade mission planned for outward, it's an outward bound trade mission for Nigeria to the US. That's planned for the month of September specifically. And then we keep member to member interaction. We have lots of engagements during the year where we get members to come interact, speak to us about the successes of your business and how the chamber has affected you. What would you like to see the government do? We just have a new administration in Nigeria, the administration of His Excellency Senator Bola Ahmed Tinubu. What would you like to see this administration implement? It might seem like the government is not listening, but like I always tell people, Rome was not built in a day. If you want to see change, you have to keep speaking, you have to keep advocating, you have to keep fighting, you have to keep trying until you achieve whatever it is you've set out to achieve. So there's so many things planned out between now and the end of the year, and we'll keep unveiling them as we go through the process.
All right. Do you have any final thoughts?
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm indeed grateful, Luke. Thank you for having me on the program. No platform is too small, like I always tell people, because you never know who is listening. Thank you for the platform. And I'd like to say that to everyone who is listening and who is watching, for one reason or the other, you might admire me for something positive. I would say keep working on yourself until you achieve your goals. You should never give up. You should never give up. Life was never really promised easy. You have to strive for whatever it is you want to achieve. And keep admiring the people you want to be like, the people you look up to. Observe what they do and try to do these things in your own way. And whether or not you like it, you're making positive impacts on yourself. Gradually, little drops of water fills a bucket.
All right. How can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
Okay, so I'm on various social media platforms. Facebook, Wofai Samuel. So you have to be careful so you don't run into some fake profiles. Wofai Samuel is my name on Facebook. And then on Instagram, at Wofai S on Instagram. On Twitter, at Wofai S as well. Wofai S on Twitter. And I'm also on LinkedIn, Wofai Samuel. And yes, if you Google me, you'll get to see a bit about my career trajectory and my what's it called now? My professional footprints.
All right. On that note, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me today. Yeah. See you next time.
Thank you. Thank you.